What's up, Smite fans? Wraithyn here. I'm back with an absolutely awesome second beginner tier list here. Before we even get started, huge shout outs to Ducky from Trifecta for helping me build this solo lane beginner tier list. I'm not a solo laner myself, so having somebody who's knowledgeable on the subject, knows every one of these gods inside and out, has tried them all, knows how easy they were to pick up or not, and he and I went through about a half-hour exercise where we went through every single one of these gods and kind of talked about their strengths and weaknesses. I think solo in particular is one of those lanes where you could pretty much play anything. But we went over the major gods in this role, the things that people may have seen a pro player play or something on the SPL or one of their friends or somebody else against them in lane and said, you know what, I think I can do that. But you know what, if you're good at Janus solo, play Janus solo. This is really a guide for folks who you get stuck in the solo lane, you really want to jungle in mid, and you didn't get either one of those roles, and you really don't want to feed. So when he and I evaluated these different gods, we evaluated them for a couple of different things. One is ease of their kit to understand from an ability perspective and how the abilities synergize together with each other. Ease of play at a low level and why. Safety, so gods with mobility or CC immune ults or things like that were obviously prioritized. And then the last criteria, which has been my criteria for every single one of these tier videos, and you'll see this in the other ones that I put out, is how good are these gods from behind? You know, if they fall down a couple of levels, are they still useful? So with that, we're going to dive right into the top tier, the SS tier, cream of the crop. And the first three that we're going to talk about here are Wukong, Jormungandr, and Sobek. Now I know what you're thinking. You're like, Wraithyn, what are you talking about? Ducky is clearly gone crazy. Tell me why these gods are good. Jormungandr, I think, speaks for himself, right? He's super safe. He's got great clear. He can farm the totem with ease. He does amazing damage. And his ultimate, believe it or not, at the end of the game, you could be 10 levels down and your ult is still going to be a threat because of the knockups. And if you have a Gem of Isolation built, the CC and the slows, Jorm is far and away the best god in this category. He's got great clear. The only thing he doesn't have is lane sustain, but he makes up for it in spades with everything else that he does. Moving on to the second one, we got Sobek. Sobek, I think, is like, from a tank perspective, he is the perfect beginner god, right? You've got an engage with his pluck. You've got an escape with his pluck. You've got a knockup on his 2, the best CC in the game. He does significant amounts of damage with that ability as well. His 3 is both anti-healing and sustaining heal for himself. His ult allows you to move at the same speed you would normally move. It's a wide AoE slow and does humongous damage when he comes up out of the ground, when he's channeled it entirely. Additionally, he has mana sustain in his ultimate, so if for some reason you get your blue invaded just because you're a guardian, it doesn't really matter. Sobek is the perfect god for new players that are playing in the tank role. You'll see him near the top of the list for the guardians. In the support role, you're going to see him at the top of the list here in this role as well. Lastly, some Wukong. Wukong is not particularly a meta character right now. That was the other thing I forgot to mention. We put a little slice of meta in here just because it's worth noting when gods are not strong. This is June the 28th, 2019. So if you're watching this 6 months from now, this could all change. But for the most part, we wanted a little bit of meta in there. And some Wukong, I think, is one of those that, regardless of the meta, he's going to be one of the safest and most new player friendly gods for anybody in the lane. He's got great clear on his 1 and his 2. Good poke damage on his 1, so you can clear from the other side of the lane away from the enemy solo laner. So if you're taking too much damage, too much poke, you can bop the wave from a good bit distance away. His 2 is a slow, good self peel, good chase, does decent damage. His 3 has excellent utility. You can use it for a stun, you can use it for a knockup to disrupt fights, or you can use it for the eagle form just to get away. It's a very high speed move. Nobody on the map, I don't think, is able to chase you that distance unless it's like a Mercury. And between that and his ultimate, you're able to get out of most sticky situations no matter what. And then the last thing, obviously, is his ultimate. You're able to go up into the air. You get some healing. You get some CC immunity. You get a nice big leap, which you can use to wait out the reset of your cooldown on your dash. And then you can take off from there. So Sun Wukong is definitely up there at the top of the list. He also makes use of Glad Shield really well because he has 4 damaging abilities. He can proc Glad Shield 4 times in a rotation of his abilities. So that's the reason he's up there. Moving on, this next tier down is kind of, they're not, I wouldn't start with these gods when you're in the solo lane, but they're certainly worth checking out, especially if you're brand new. The first 3 tiers are really, I would consider them all new player friendly, super new player friendly. So we're going to go Achilles and Vimana. The reason for this is Achilles has excellent mobility between his 3 and his the aggressive stance where he gains movement speed, and also his ultimate. You can pretty much just zip down the lane away from trouble if you ever run into it. If you're really not confident in your abilities and you don't want to use your ult aggressively to try and bully somebody down in lane, you can just hold that thing for whenever you get ganked, and it's basically a get out of jail free card. His 1 and 2 combined are great damage, good sustain on all of his abilities when you combine his 2 with the Glad Shield. And then again, his ult is CC immune. With the recent changes to him, you can poke a good amount without ever getting close to the wave or the enemy player. So if you're bullied under the tower, you're still good. And then obviously late game, as you get into these team fights, just having that stun for setup or that ult to execute, it doesn't matter how far behind you are, he's going to have some value. Same thing goes with Vimana. He's got the big CC immune ult where he turns into the big baby and can basically walk away from trouble. He's got a slow in his kit. He's got good damage in his kit. He makes great use of the Gladiator Shield. And then also on top of that, his dash, his 1, is fantastic for getting out of trouble because it's also a knockup, right? So it's not something that somebody can body block or interrupt very easily, and you can CC people away from you as long as you use that intelligently. All right, moving on. Got Bologna, Cyrus, and Terra. This last tier are kind of gods that I would say are more in the advanced beginner level. Bologna in particular, a lot of new players just sit there and they spam her abilities and they don't really use her 1, her 2, and her 3 effectively when it comes to the proper situation to use them, right? A lot of people love to use the hammer. Almost nobody uses the shield, especially when against auto attackers. But if you're able to understand her kit a little bit and what each of the stances do, you can realistically just build a ninja tabby, build a berserker shield, and sit in lane with your 3 up and auto attack everything to death, and you're never going to die. Her 2, the cleaves on her 2 are great clear if you're laning against somebody that doesn't have a good interrupt, and her 1 is great for the slow and chasing down auto attack based gods because of the block stacks. Her ultimate, again, CC immune, get out of jail free card, and late game if you're behind, you can ult into these team fights, provide a big AoE where your team gets bonus protections and damage, I believe. I actually have to go check that. But, just a generally good ultimate, regardless of what level you are. And a strong stun as well if you can get them in the middle of it. Osiris, this one was kind of controversial for us because Osiris to play really, really well is difficult, right? You got to utilize auto attack canceling at the appropriate times. You've got to understand when to use his 3 in a team fight. When to ult, and timing is very important with Osiris, but that's kind of later stages, late in the game when you guys are team fighting. Osiris primarily is just impossible to lose lane on because you just beat the holy hell out of whoever you're laning against. The best advice I have for you is don't use your 1 and 2 on the wave. Use them on the enemy player. And then when the minions group up on you because you've done damage to the enemy player, use your cleave auto attacks to bully down the wave. Osiris is one of those gods that gets fantastic pressure. And again, when he's behind, you can run into these team fights, use your 3 as a tether, reduce the enemy damage that they're outputting, and you get a nice big sweet AoE stun if you manage to stick it to other players. So I like Osiris. I think he's rather easy to understand. Watch a couple YouTube videos on how to play him, and you'll have no problems whatsoever. The last one here in the kind of S tier categories is Terra. Terra is one of those gods where you buy a Guardian's Blessing, you sit under tower, you can see the totem, and you just farm. She's got a great heal on her 3. Her ultimate is, I think, one of the best in the entire game, with the damage on enemy players and also the healing for your players. Her 2 is a fantastic stun if you're able to hit it. And then the combo of her 1 and 3 is a big, giant, wide AoE root is amazing. Terra's one of those gods where you kind of have to pick up the combo a little bit, so it's not super brain dead. She's very much in the meta right now. And you just have to learn 1 or 2 things about how to initiate or how to combo her abilities together to really make her super effective. And then anybody can play Terra, but she's very, very valuable late game to her team, even when behind. So she's definitely up here on this list. All right, moving on to the A pluses, and these are gods where we're starting to get into, if you play well on them or if you understand their kit very well, you could succeed even if you're a newer player to Conquest or the solo lane. And these are going to be your Amaterasu, Artio, Baron, Hades. This is a ducky pick. I don't know if I agree with it. I think Hades is a little tougher to play, but he's confident you guys can figure it out. Excuse me, I've been sick. And Zhonghui. The reason for this is high sustain across the board. You can keep yourself healthy pretty much forever if you land your abilities, like Artio's 3, Baron's 2, Hades Explosion, and then Zhonghui's 2. And then Amaterasu could just keep switching stances for sustain. Super high sustain here. You're going to have no problems in lane out healing your enemy unless they're King Arthur with Glad Shield. But their kits require some complexity. You've got a couple of skill shots in the Amaterasu shield. Artio is pretty brain dead. You just spam abilities. Baron, you got to be able to hit your root and play well. And Hades, I have him down here because you almost always have to use your dash to get in the middle of these fights. Zhonghui, on the other hand, the reason he's down this far, I think he's a strong god in the solo lane right now, but I think the only reason I put him down this far is he has no mobility, right? All these other gods have a dash of some sort or a speed boost. Zhonghui does not, but the protections on his ultimate and the fact that he has such high sustain and lockdown between the slow on his 1 and the stun on his 3 make him a pretty solid character. Late game, if you blink into a team fight and you got gem equipped and you ult, you are having a huge impact on whether or not your team secures kills. So I like him up there for that. The rest of these gods, pretty much self-explanatory on their kits and how to play them. Amaterasu, you really just got to be good at not engaging until you kind of hit the level 12 mark. But other than that, they're all very, very strong. I still think they're worth playing, especially as you get more experience in the solo lane. Moving on down to the A tier. This is kind of the tier where you can kind of put anything that's okay, but it's not like earth-shatteringly good. I don't think you're going to be super successful on it if you play these gods as a new solo laner. But worth checking out if you want to vary up your play, try something different, do something else, and you feel like you got a good handle on some of these upper tier gods. So the first one's going to be Camazotz. We're going to do Shock, Chang'e, Hercules. That's a ducky pick. Kuzenbo, Xingqian, and Ymir. I already know that these middle tiers from like A to like C are going to be controversial. So you guys can leave some thoughts in your comments about whether or not you think Ducky and I are full of shit. But realistically, I wouldn't recommend these to any new players. Shock, everybody says, oh, Shock's the best god for new players. He's so easy to understand, like win lane, lose game. Well, that's part of the reason he's in the middle of the pack. As soon as you build anti-healing and you get into the late game stages, if a Shock is behind at all, he's useless, which is why I have him down here. Camazotz, high sustain, can really heal himself off of his 3. Camazotz is good as a King Arthur counter, and if you want to bully out your lane with just straight up out healing the enemy team, just with Glad Shield and Blackthorn. But late game, he doesn't really do much. He's safe because he has a CC immune ult and a little tiny leap. But, he's kind of middle of the pack for me, and that's mostly a meta decision in the fact that he's really just used to counter King Arthur. Chang'e is kind of a fun one if you want to experiment and try something different. You grab a Meditate level 1, and you basically never have to back, even if you get your blue invaded. you just send the bunny back, keep buying items, every time you have 700, 800 gold, buy an item, until she gets built out. She doesn't really have problems sustaining in lane. She's got decent clear. She's got a cool ult. It's a big stun, especially late game. CC immune on her too. Not earth-shatteringly good by any means, but if you're looking to try something different and switch it up, Runga is a fun one to try and pick up. Hercules. This is where we had a little bit of disagreement and controversy. I think he's actually harder for new players to play because almost nobody hits their plucks. I still have trouble hitting my plucks with Herc. He's got good sustain, good survivability. His passive allows him to beat the hell out of somebody even when he's taking damage. So, you get that pluck stun off and you just auto them to death. His ult is good for objective secure, clearing the wave, engaging in team fights, picking up kills. So he's strong, but the problem is you got two realistically, I think they're difficult skill shots if you're not used to playing Herc. So that's why he's kind of in this mid-tier, like, hey, you know what? If you're feeling confident, you feel like you know his kit, you want to play him, Herc's a good pick. Kuzenbo, Jingchen, and Ymir are really late game plays, right? Where you're kind of stuck under your tower. You can be a little bit aggressive in lane, especially if you're up against somebody who doesn't have sustain, but neither do they, right? Anyway, Kuzenbo, Jingchen, and Ymir are three gods where if you're not laning against somebody with sustain, they're probably okay to pick. They've got great control. They've got great late game team fight presence. They have great ultimates, either for zoning with Jingchen and Ymir, or just disruption with Kuzenbo. Jing and Kuzenbo in particular have good mobility. Ymir does not. So if you're going to pick either one of these two, I would do it over Ymir. But all in all, you can lane with them. They're not really that hard to play. Pretty easy. Grab a Guardian's Blessing, and at worst, you just sit under your tower and clear. Wait for the late game. All right, moving into the B+ category. These are kind of like the harder to play gods in lane. And we're going to go Erlong, Fenrir, Juan, Nike, and Tyr. So I have a feeling this is going to be the most controversial category. I thought it might be the A's, but this one, somebody's inevitably going to be going, oh, dude, Nike's busted, right? Here's the thing, right? Most of these guys have fairly complex kits to use well. The exception, I think, of Erlong. Erlong and Guan and Tyr are the only ones with sustain in their kit. But Erlong, for one, I think in a like a hybrid warrior role, I don't know. I almost like him better in the jungle. If you have the opportunity to pick Erlong Shen, he should almost be your jungler and not in the solo lane. He still does well here. Same thing. Grab a Ninja Tabby and a Berserker Shield, and you're going to be fine, just like Bologna. But I don't know that he necessarily does exceedingly well against any of these other characters. It's kind of one of those things where I would almost pick everybody above this line before I picked him. And he's not as straightforward to play in solo lane as he is in the jungle or support. So his solo is kind of his weakest role of the three that he can play. So I put him down here. He probably could very easily be in the A categories. Fenrir, you could play him. He's good for the late game ult. Pick up a tank. Build yourself tanky. Pick up a tank and hold him in front of your team. He's good. His laning's kind of weak. He's got issues with sustain until you get his 2 online. Same thing with Guan until you get the heal online, which is after you finish your clear. So around level 9, Guan's kind of butt cheeks, if I'm being straight. And the other thing is that both Guan and Fenrir and Erlong Shen are really heavily countered by anti-heal, right? They can't use their 2, they can't use their heal, they can't use their ultimate. You can, but you just get no value out of it in return. And anti-heal is extremely popular right now in almost every single build, every single game. Nike, I have her down here because she's boring, and a lot of people get bored when they play her for the first time. Her kit's actually easy to understand. She's pretty safe, but I just feel like she doesn't do anything. High Res has even admitted this, or Titanforge has even admitted this, that she's kind of a boring god to play, and they're working on a kit rework. They haven't said it directly, but you don't really rework a god's kit unless there's something wrong with it. So more to come on that in the mid-season patch, I think. And Tyr, he's complex. He's got 6 abilities. You got to learn how to chain them together. Well, 5 abilities. And you got to learn how to chain them together effectively to be any good at them. Gets shut down hard by anti-healing and cripples and things like that, all of which are very popular right now. I think Poseidon's one of the best gods in the game in the mid lane. And you just get locked down. All right, moving on. Next category. These are kind of... We're not quite dumpster tier yet, but these are things that you can play. They're not particularly good. We've got Athena, Cullen, and Horus. We'll start with Athena. And you say, wait a minute, Wraithyn. Athena's the best. She can alter her teammates and take objectives and everything like that. Totally fair and fine and true. The problem is that as soon as you start taking bad ults to bad fights or bad objectives, you're going to lose your lane and you're going to lose out on all your farm. One of the biggest things that soul laners need to learn when you're learning the soul lane is, when do I rotate versus farm versus proxy versus invade? And Athena is extremely punishing, because if you ult the wrong target or you go to a fight that you shouldn't be at, you're going to fall way behind. Late game, she's really only useful for her taunt and a little bit of damage, and the fact that if she gets poked out, she can come back to the fight with her ultimate. She's not that useful from behind. And again, Ducky and I both felt that Athena players could fall behind pretty easily if they're not taking fights wisely. If you're a more experienced player, you can probably play Athena just fine. So Cullen, we have him down in this tier because managing his rage is difficult for some new players, and if you're not very, very cognizant about how much rage you're building at all times with everything you do, you can get caught out. You can get caught without your transformation, and or entering a team fight without your passive build. So we left him down here, or sorry, without your rage build. We left him down here. If you understand how his rage works, Cullen's very strong. They just buffed him. Horus, oh god, he's a great support. I think he's a terrible soul laner. His ultimate's pretty much useless in the soul lane. You're gonna get ganked and killed before you ever get it off, unless you're super late game and you have a ton of items built. I think late game utility is only really good if you have your entire team on board with you. So if you're a beginner player or you're beginner to solo, trying to get the 4 other people that are with you coordinated to what you're thinking, what you're doing is really, really tough. I think Horus is still a good god. You could certainly be successful in solo with him, but I mean, I don't think there's any situation where I would pick Horus over any of these other gods, especially if I'm newer to the role. All right, moving on down into butt cheeks territory. We've got Aphrodite. We've got Cabrakan. We got Cerberus, and we've got L. Couple of reasons here. Aphrodite and Hel in particular are very, very gankable early game. They are late game healers, and they are so vulnerable in the early parts of the game. Their clear isn't, her clear is okay. The healing is nice, but you don't really offer your team anything in the late game except linking to somebody and ulting them. You can get a little bit of damage off, a little bit of utility off with the stun. But again, why would you pick this god over any of the other ones on this list? And the answer is there's almost never a reason to. I think people overvalue the healing, especially with how much anti-healing is in the meta. And the other thing is the second that you pick Aphrodite, everybody on the other team, it's the weirdest thing, is you could have 4 healers and nobody will ever think to pick up any anti-healing. But the second you lock in Aphrodite, everybody buys it. So she's shut down really hard by anti-healing. I don't really think she adds much value to a team fight. I wouldn't pick her. Cabrakan and Serb, just, high mana costs on Cabrakan. Doesn't really do anything better than any of the other guardians that you can pick, or other warriors that you can pick. Pretty low tier in my mind. The only thing he really offers to a late game team fight is his ult and his disruption on his 3. He's got decent CC, but again, you kind of got to put yourself in the middle of everything, which is not good when you're trying to play a guardian from behind. I wouldn't play him unless you're super confident in the role and just looking for something different to do. Cerberus, the only reason I have him here is because the complexity of landing the stun on his 1 is, I think something that people underestimate. I see a lot of new players that pick Cerberus miss their 1s all the time. It's such a crucial ability to hit. It only works on a single target. His ult is great, sure, but when everything else that's good about him is tied down to a little narrow triangle, I don't think he's valuable to play. Hell, same thing as Aphrodite. Her early game is super weak. She's super gankable. Doesn't really offer much to the team fight in the way of peel or dive or lockdown. She can just sit back and heal her allies and shell out a little bit of damage from long range, but that's about it. Again, she's really down here because why would you pick Hell when you can pick all these other gods? All right. On to the dumpster tier. This is the trash tier. Remember, this is for new players only, okay? Or beginners in the role. All right? This is not if you are an experienced player. Why did I have Hunbats in there? If you're an experienced player at all, you may do very, very well on some of these gods, so don't write them off if you are significantly better at this game than somebody who's just picking up the role. So let's go through them one by one. Apwach, you don't play Apwach. You are not Deathwalker. Number 2, Anubis solo. Don't play Anubis solo. He's garbage and he's shut down by anti-heal. Don't play Ares solo. Again, you are not Deathwalker. Okay. On to the less controversial ones. King Arthur. Okay. King Arthur is not a good god. King Arthur is not a good god in bronze. King Arthur is not a good god in plat. King Arthur is not a good god in diamond. King Arthur is a good god in the SPL. And that's it. He literally loses everywhere else. He loses more games than any other god. He is bad. Unless you are variety and you know how to play this god, you are putting your team at a disadvantage. Unless you know this god inside and out. Everybody gets frustrated with King Arthur because they don't know how to play against them. If I asked any of you watching this video right now, sorry, small rant, how would you play against a Ratatasker or an Arachne in the jungle if you walked into them at level 2? Most of you would say, run the hell away. And you go, yeah, exactly. It's Arachne and Ratatasker. They have great early games, great 1v1s. Why would I want to fight them? The same thing goes for King Arthur. You have to learn how to play around him. And that's why people find him frustrating, is because of the laning phase. But if you get into late game fights and you got a couple cripples on your team, you got some CC, Arthur gets shredded by most good teams. Arthur is good at level 5 when he gets his gladiator shield. He is good mostly till about level 14 or 15. And then when everybody else gets pen and CC and everything else online and anti-heal online, Arthur is garbage. So if you're in these games with Arthur, just play back. You don't have to fight him in the wave every single time. Anyway, I'm off the tangent. Needless to say, Arthur is terrible. If you want to feel confident when you're laning, you can pick up Arthur, buy a Glad Shield, and have fun. But just don't expect to win, because in the late game, if you're not super, super cognizant of how you're using his entire kit, every ability, all 8 abilities, you're not going to succeed on Arthur. He's not good for new players. Don't play him. Loki, he's garbage. Don't play him ever. He's a terrible god. He's literally been nerfed into the ground. He's not good. Don't do it. Nisha, same reason he was kind of at the low tier for the jungle list. He's got 3 skill shots that are, difficult for players to hit. He does have some sustain in his kit, which is fine. But 2 of his abilities put him out of position or into the enemy team fight. So if you're not hyper aware of what's going on in the team fight and where everybody is and whose abilities are up or down, Nisha is really going to end up with you in the middle of 5 people getting your ass beat. That's all I got to say about that. Nox, you are not Ducky. Do not play Nox in the solo lane. Not good. You have to land that combo. It's essential. And if you don't, you're going to fall behind. Just because you saw it in the SPL doesn't make it good. Odin is terrible. He's a bad god. He's been nerfed too many times. Until there's a rework of his kit or some kind of utility added to his ult, he's going to be terrible. Nobody plays him anymore. Even with all of the healing in the meta right now, nobody's picked up Odin. Morrigan, same reason as before with the jungle. Morrigan requires you to understand the kits of all 9 other players on the map. So if you are a newer player or a beginning player in the solo lane, Morrigan is not somebody that I would play, especially if you're just getting used to the role. All right. I think that pretty much covers it for all the major gods. Yeah, you can play Bastet in the solo lane. You can play Bacchus if you want. You can play Kumba if you want. But these are the ones that I think I see more commonly than not. Again, if you're a newer player, and you are new to the role or new to Smite Conquest in general, I would stick to these 9 gods up at the top. I may get around to doing some how-to guides on how to play them. I may ask Ducky to help me with those when he comes back from being overseas. He's got some great tips and tricks, and he may be putting out a series on these gods as well. So definitely check out his stream or my stream. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop a like or a comment, and definitely subscribe if you like content like this. This is kind of a weaker list for me. I got to be honest. I'm not as confident in my knowledge of the soul lane just because I haven't played it in so long, which is why I leaned on Ducky for a lot of this. But would love this to start some creative debate on what you guys think, or if we should shift some stuff up or down. But I really think these core 8 gods up at the top are where beginner players should be focusing their time and efforts. Maybe bleeding down into the A+ category. But if you guys like this, drop a comment and be sure to follow on stream for live entertainment like this. See you guys later.